Hello, welcome to another episode of PolicyPod. Today I have the distinct pleasure of hosting Amitav Virmani on my podcast. Amitav is the founder and CEO of the Education Alliance, a not-for-profit organization working to transform India's public education system through collaborative partnerships with the government. The Education Alliance has worked with multiple state governments and municipal bodies in Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, Tripura, Uttarakhand and Delhi, both on systemic reforms, focus on foundational literacy and numeracy, teacher development and many other things within the education realm. Before founding the Education Alliance, Amitav was the country director of Absolute Return for Kids India, a UK-based NGO where he worked on school education, school leadership, school vouchers, English literacy, among many other things. He began his career in the private sector with the pharma space and was also involved in the telecom space before that, where he worked both in US and in India. He had also contributed to his family business in food processing and real estate in Punjab. Amitav studied in the prestigious Doon school, did his bachelor's in economics at the St. Stephen's College in Delhi University, and holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in the US. He also serves on the board of multiple educational and non-profit organizations, including the Virmani Education Trust, the Teach for India Delhi Advisory Board, the SRF Foundation, among many others. Further, he is also an Aspen Fellow, an Ashoka Fellow, and an Ankur Fellow, and he is also involved in multiple other advisory boards and not-for-profit organizations. It's quite a dazzling CV itself, Amitav. I'm so happy to have you here on my podcast today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Amitav, I've given the what we call on-paper introduction of yours, but would love to actually hear in your own words your journey. What has it been like?
Sure. Great. Firstly, thank you for having me, Ayush. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to speak to you and hopefully share my journey with your listeners. You know, I, for the first maybe 32, 33 years of my life, lived a very scripted existence. You know, my life was written for me. My journey was scripted for me. I was born in a business family where had I continued doing business, I would have been a fourth generation business person. Of course, I went to a brilliant school in Delhi, after which I went to boarding school in Doon for 6 years, came back and went to a great college, worked for a few years, went off to the US, after which I was expected to work in the US to get some experience and come back and join the family business. And after I got all my education, I realized that now my options and my choices have opened up. And I think that was an exciting phase in my life because it allowed me to explore beyond the script that was being written for me. In 2004 is when I came back from the US. It was also ironic that in the same year my father got diagnosed with cancer. I was working in pharmaceuticals at that time with the same company I was working with in the US, but I was based in Bombay. Still remember the call I got from my mother who told me that we've just got an ultrasound done of dad and we found a big nodule in his kidney and we need to get some investigations done. And I said, okay, I'll come back to Delhi and let's explore it further. And I think that was a turning point. That day was a turning point in my life because he got, soon after that got diagnosed with kidney cancer. He lived for 4 years, but those 4 years were a stage in my life where I did not expect what unfolded. The script, so to speak, was now no longer in play. I was now in a position where I had to write my own script. I reached a fork in the road 2 years post my father's diagnosis. I reached a fork in the road because he was unable to work, and plus I was still working. I still was in the pharmaceutical world. So I think that those 2-3 years were a defining moment. That fork in the road was a point where I had to take a decision, decide which way I wanted to go, left or wanted to go right. And I had so many questions that were being thrown at me, but I didn't have the answers. And I think in 2008, again, when my father passed away in July of 2008, that's the point in time in my life I think I gained a lot of clarity thanks to the conversations I had with him about his journey and about his life and about what he had achieved, but what more importantly, what he would have liked to achieve or what he would have liked to do. And I think those lessons just left an indelible mark in my in my mind and in my heart, more importantly. And fortunately, I chose the lesser traveled path and dived headfirst into the social sector. As it turned out, ironically, or maybe not ironically, but it was, I guess, divine intervention that gave me the opportunity to pursue a career in the social sector, in education, working with children, something that has been my passion and my interest all my life, but I never thought I'll make a career out of it. So here I was in 2008, joining the social sector, working with a UK-based non-profit, not knowing what I'm getting into, but like I said, I dived in head first and I said, dekhenge, hopefully I'll learn how to swim. If not, somebody will rescue me. And here I am 17 years later. So that's really been my, the last 17 years have been the unscripted part. I've rewritten the script on my own, loving the script that I'm writing. I think abhi picture baki hai in a way, but what I've done so far in the last 17 years has been a lot of fun and a lot of learning.
You know, I think when I was researching for this podcast, the one particular thing that I read during my research, in your interviews and everything, that I was looking forward to talk about was about those moments, because I think I can't explain or define it, but maybe I was emotional about it myself while reading about all of those things, because in one of your interviews you talk about how the likely course would have been, oh, you have so much family business, just join that. Absolutely. When your father is sick.
Yeah.
But you, in one of your interviews, talked about how your father said, do whatever you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
You just have one life, and I think that gave you the courage and sort of backing to be able to do this.
You know, sometimes children live vicariously for their parents, in a sense. And my father used to always tell me that I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to teach, and he had actually had the privilege to go to the US to study flour milling technology. He went to the University of Kansas, and he got an assistant teaching role at the time, and he was so excited. And he told his father, my grandfather, that I've been, invited to join the university as an assistant teaching fellow, and I'm so excited. And, but he was the only son, and back then, you were a lot more conservative. You didn't have that liberal communication with your parents where you could share that, nahi, mujhe kuch aur karna hai, allow me to live my life and all of that. So he, like a very obedient son, came back and joined the family business, much against his own wishes. He was never a business person. It wasn't in his mind. He was a teacher, he was a philosopher, he was a thinker, he was a traveler, he was a trekker. But that's not the life he was allowed to live. So he then said, when we were born, my sisters and I were born, said, I won't do that to my kids. I'll let them live their life the way they want to, and I'll give them that freedom to do that. So forget about the business. If the business is not of interest to you, shut it down, sell it, do whatever you want with it, right? But let me educate you well. So because you don't know necessarily what you need to be educated on. So I'll give you a great education. After which, do what you want. You want to live in America, you want to come back to India, you want to work on your own, start your own business, join the social sector. Those were those conversations in the 4 years that I had, which gave me that freedom, and that I call that privilege. I call that privilege, not necessarily being born in a business family and having wealth, but more importantly having choice. And that ability to have choice and exercise choice is what I call privilege. And I said, now let me make the most of it.
It almost got me to relate, because my grandfather was a teacher here in Delhi, and my father, even while my grandfather was a teacher, was not allowed to be a teacher because there was a family business, and he was not a business person and everything. So, but he gave me that choice. Very this thing. But I think another thought that was coming to my mind when you were talking about you were always interested in education, I was wondering how, because there's this person who went to school, went to college, was in different businesses, then was in the US. When or how did you discover? Did you take up any volunteering opportunities while you were in school, or what got you to even because this was a bold step?
Very radical, very bold. Not part of the family legacy in any way, but somewhere I guess it was part of the family DNA, right? In 1916, which is well before any of us were born, the family had set up the Virmani Education Trust in Lalpur, which is now in Pakistan. That's where the family was from, and it was a very large family. My grandfather had 2 brothers and 8 sisters, and they were very close. They were all lived together under one roof, grew up together. So imagine their children when they were born, like my father's generation, and their cousins all lived together and grew up together. Back then is when the education trust, the Virmani Education Trust, was set up. So 1916, right, more than 110 years ago, 109 years ago. And so the trust then decided to set up a school in Pakistan, which was run by the family and continued to run till partition. And then post-partition, of course, when the family moved to this part of India, largely Amritsar, and and then Delhi. My grandfather had moved to Delhi because he had a base here as well. They then 3-4 members of the family, my grandfather's generation, pushed the government to then allocate that land which belonged to us in Lalpur in Delhi, and said we want to continue running that school and we want to continue providing education to underprivileged people because we've done it for so many years and allow us the opportunity to do it. So fortunately we were allocated that land in Roopnagar, which is near Khalsa College, in 1954, and the school restarted under the name of the Dhanpatmal Virmani Senior Secondary School, and then subsequently we set up another school neighboring that called the Virmani Public School. So those schools have been running since 1954, which is 70 plus years. And I, at a very young age, was taken to those schools by my parents, for the sports day and the annual day and Independence Day and Diwali celebration. So, as a young 7-8-year-old going to the school and meeting the kids and being part of the award ceremony and these functions, I guess somewhere was sparking something in me, lighting the fuse in me. And maybe that's where it all began, which then maybe sparked my curiosity to consider education or helped me develop a passion for education. I can't say where it came from, but maybe that's where it began. And then, of course, once I grew up and got married, of course, my love for kids. I've always just loved children. I'll always gravitate towards toddlers and young kids and have conversations with them because I just love the fact that they're so innocent and they speak their mind and they speak the truth and they find it hard to lie before a certain age. But that's just beautiful, that just shows you how wonderful human nature actually is, but over time how corrupted it gets because of the nature and the nurture that children get over their lifetime. So I think that's really where education came into me. That's where the passion for kids and then these two worlds, when they combined, and I got this opportunity, maybe that's why I jumped in without too much fear, I would say.
Wow. Oh, very, very interesting. Very interesting. In fact, I think I was always also passionate about school education, and I went to a boarding school too. And we were on a service project near Gwalior, and I remember entering a school. Like I had a fairly urban upbringing, and I went to a rural area for probably the first time when I was in class 11. Then that school was basically double the size of this conference room.
Wow.
And I did not know what teaching learning material and teacher professional development and all of these terms are. I just knew instinctively that these kids don't have what I have, and that was not the breach. We were supposed to just immerse ourselves in the entire experience, but I ended up teaching those kids for 3 hours that day because I think so. That's very nice to hear. And I think when you were talking about your love for kids, I was reminded of this video I was seeing of you, because I've seen so many different interviews and podcasts and videos. I think I've seen you the happiest when you're interacting with a kid on the field.
By far. Absolutely.
So,
I can go on and on and on. Sometimes I have to be pulled away by my team because they're like, bas bhi kar, let's move on. But absolutely.
I think in another conversation you once said that the main job of people working in education is supposed to be for them to be 90% on the field.
Should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you're not out there speaking to the people you are doing this work for, you are not listening to them. You're not hearing their voices. You're not understanding what they're looking for. You're not you don't have a good understanding of their aspirations.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, it's a world of make believe. You're sitting in a conference room, in an air conditioned room, and deciding for them what the world should look like for them, or what schooling or education should look like for them. And many a time you get it horribly wrong, right? So I think being out in the field, speaking to people, speaking to children, speaking to parents, interacting with communities, interacting with teachers is so critical to deciding how you're going to fix the problem and what problem needs to be fixed. Many a time we're fixing the wrong problem. So yeah, I think I tell my team a lot. I still don't feel they do it enough, but I tell my team a lot. Get out of the field every week, if not every day.
Wow. No, I think that also gives me a good segue to come to talking more about your career in the education space, both absolute return for kids and the Education Alliance journey. I think when I was looking at your journey, I was wondering how was your, let's say, the first couple of years at Absolute Return for Kids. This person again has love for kids, has an MBA, has some corporate experience, has done some marketing, and now finds himself in this position of running an organization as country head, which is working in education, a completely different space. What was that like?
So the first couple of years, I had faith in myself because I had that conviction. I'm coming for the right reason. I've come in with the right heart and head. I have left a corporate job. I've left my business behind. So I was okay. And I certainly didn't come in for the purposes of making money. That was the last objective, because I wouldn't be in the social sector if I had come to make money. I had come clearly to say, okay, let's see what I can do with this passion, and let's see if I can play a role in solving this mega problem, a small role in solving this mega problem. So I had all the belief in myself. What I needed was people to back me, right? And just like a incoming cricketer in the Indian team, they come with a lot of belief in themselves, but with that belief is a lot of fear as well. कि अगर मैं पहली बॉल पे आउट हो गया तो क्या मुझे अगले मैच में रखेंगे कि नहीं, right? And I had that same feeling, is that do I have the luxury to make mistakes? Do I have the luxury to experiment and try things? Do I have the luxury to come in and dictate what I think should happen, which may be very different to how the sector thinks, or how the team thinks, or how the people on my board think, right? And those first 2 years were very unnerving, because I would say that those first 2 years I was fairly straitjacketed. I had been put into a role and I inherited that role and say, this is what you have to do, right? And we'll tell you from the UK what we think you should do in India. And I pretty much followed that. And it wasn't a bad thing. We were focusing on school leadership. So a very integral part of education reform is to create great school leaders. And we focused on school leadership. We worked with leaders in Mumbai and with leaders in Delhi. And it was a fabulous program. But it was exorbitant to deliver. It just cost an arm and a leg to train those leaders. I was spending more on training a leader in 1 month than the teacher, the principal's salary in an entire year. So think about that. The cost of that program was so high that I took that back to my board and said, I don't think we can grow this. I don't think we can sustain this. So let's rethink. What was lucky in those first 2 year periods, in the first 2 year period, was while I had a few people questioning me in terms of whether this is the right thing to do, and you're questioning us too much, and just do what we're telling you to do, I had an equal number of people on the board who were allowing me to think differently. And those guys backed me. And I feel that today I owe a lot to the fact that the people who backed me allowed me to think differently, allowed me to explore more, allowed me to go beyond what we were doing, which then gave me even more courage. Like again, in using the cricket term, वो freedom आ गई खेलने की, and फिर चौके भी मारे, छक्के भी मारे, और games भी खेले. And that's basically what happened. So it wasn't easy. It could have gone horribly wrong. Had no one on the board taken the courage to back me, I would have been gone. The sector would have been, would have rejected me, and I would have been back to I don't know where. It would have been a very different life.
Yeah. I think while we are talking about courage, I would want to come to your baby, which is your current role, the Education Alliance. And I think it was a courageous decision to start something of your own because it takes a lot of energy. And I believe it was a breakfast conversation with a mentor which led to that. Why don't you tell about what was happening in your head when you thought of the Education Alliance? And
because having worked with this UK-based non-profit for 6 years, I had the privilege to travel to a lot of countries and see many different programs and many different education reform initiatives across different countries, the US, the UK, Asia, of course, across India. And I saw a lot of good work happening in a lot of these countries. What people had tried differently across these geographies 25 years ago, and now where they've reached 25 years later. So I had the luxury to see them over a period of time, why those programs started and what happened with them and who was behind them and what their trajectory and growth and progress had been, and so on and so forth. And the two things that I saw in the US and UK really kind of piqued my interest was the charter school model in the US and the academy school model in the UK. Basically, these two models are models of public-private partnership, where the government funds NGOs and private institutions to come in and run government schools, right? Because the government at a certain point in time said, listen, we've tried to run these schools, but we failed miserably. And we don't think we can do it because we just have tried thrown everything at it, but it's not working. So maybe we should invite others to come in and solve this problem. So the charter school movement started in the US with that premise. The academy movement started with that premise in the UK. And I studied those models very, very closely. As it turned out, ARC, the organization I was working with, actually did that as its primary intervention in the UK. It ran at the time about 40 academies, which were 40 government schools given to ARC to run, and ARC was paid a per pupil subsidy to run these schools. So but the results in these schools were outstanding. They were better than some of the elite private schools of the UK, some of the elite private schools of the US. And I said, wow, that means it's possible that if government gives you adequate funding, holds you accountable for a certain set of outcomes and outputs, measures those well in an independent manner, it can actually hold somebody accountable for delivering high quality educational results, right? And I said, wow, is India ready for that? So I think I was largely inspired by those models and by those interventions. I came back to India. I said, let me explore this. I started the conversation, of course, with my boss, Lucy Heller, who's one of the most well-known education reformists in the UK, and I think very highly of her. She's been a mentor of mine for a long time in the early stages of my career. And then she said, I'll back you if you want to push this idea in India. I came back to Delhi and I started speaking to a bunch of people. And the first 2-3 people I spoke to, of course, Ashish Dhawan being one of them. He was also very new to education. He was just about setting up Central Square Foundation, had set up Central Square Foundation back then, became a dear friend through a common connect. And we started talking. He loved the idea. He said, great, let me ask 1 or 2 more. He brought in Jayant Sinha, who was heading Omidyar Network at the time, who also said, let's have a conversation around this. Who then brought in Debashish Mittal, who was heading Michael and Susan Dell Foundation at the time. He also joined. And then Lucy Heller from ARC, the UK. So these 4 people and myself sat around a table over a couple of months, had multiple conversations, gave me the mandate to say, go set up this, go set up the sort of business plan, so to speak, for this idea, and then let's see what we can do with it. And it took me 2-3 months to come back with a fairly detailed proposal, and these organizations backed me and said, all right, let's set up an entity that's going to do this. And that was the birth of the Education Alliance. So and they supported me for 3 years, gave me seed money to be able to run it, and I had a great run in those first 3 years. Because I had the backing of these well-intentioned and leaders who really guided me and sort of steered me in the right direction.
Wow. Wow. I have a lot of questions and things that related to all of these aspects that you just shared with us. But I think before I go on to those like different points, I would prefer to also talk about the Education Alliance itself. What's been the journey like overall?
Sure.
It's the 11th year now.
Yes.
What has been the journey? What are the kind of work that you have been doing since?
Yeah.
And what have been the accomplishments and all of those things? Yeah.
Sure. So, we started with PPPs in education, and we said we'll try and bring in non-profit organizations to turn around failing government schools. Right? And we'll play the intermediary role. We'll play the role that sits between government and non-profits, because no one plays that role. And that then, what I had observed in the previous 6 years was that because no one plays that role, NGOs typically shy away from working with government and vice versa, because वो conversation breakdown हो जाती है, expectation mismatch हो जाता है, agreements में जो लिखा है वो doesn't really capture the essence of what needs to get done. Nobody really holds each other accountable, and then projects start falling apart. And you spend 2-3 years, you spend a lot of money, but governments change, people change, program objectives change, and you walk away. So we said we must play that role and come in and sit in the middle and make sure that the NGOs get an open space to come in and run these schools, right? So that's how we began, and we spent the first 5 years doing just that. This was 2014 to 2019, right? To the end of 2019. And that was a point in time where, of course, it was pre-COVID. We didn't know COVID is going to hit. But in the middle of 2019, because of what we were doing in Delhi, we also got invited to go work in Tamil Nadu. It was a World Bank conference that was happening in Delhi. I was speaking at that conference. There were a lot of principal secretaries that had come from different states because World Bank had invited them. And the principal secretary of Tamil Nadu at the time actually called me out at the end of the conference, had a chat with me over a cup of tea and said, we've got 40 NGOs we work with in Tamil Nadu. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of working with them in that it's not necessarily very strategic. I think we can do a lot more. There are some who are doing great work, but we haven't scaled their work. There's some who may not be doing great work, but we let them continue working and so on and so forth. So do you think you can come and work with us in just organizing this space a little bit more? So I said, sure. Next week I flew to Chennai, spent some time with him there. Cut a long story short, we basically set up a small team to help them think through this, right? And that's how we entered Tamil Nadu. That then led to us widening the scope of our work, because having worked on PPPs in education over a period of 5 years, we had touched a maximum of only 30 schools in that 5-year period. Albeit those 30 schools were doing great, and we had brought in 12 different NGO partners to run these 30 schools, and all of them were doing better than a traditional government school in the South Delhi Municipal Corporation. It was still not large enough, right? And I remember Ashish calling me over a conversation over breakfast at his house, and he said, I think the Education Alliance can do a lot more. I think you guys should be doing bigger work. I think you guys should be across states, not just Delhi. And I think you can expand your presence greatly. And I thought about it, came back, discussed it with my team, and I said, guys, do you think you're ready to go beyond Delhi? Do you think you're ready to go beyond just PPPs in school education? And fortunately enough, I had a team that was willing to back me and my thinking. And then we went to Tamil Nadu. From there, we went to Tripura. Then Madhya Pradesh opened up. Of course, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it was almost like a landslide of opportunities that came our way, because government was caught unawares. Yeah. Private schools, they got their act together. A large percentage of private schools said, we'll go digital. And we'll do Zoom, and we'll teach children while they're at home because they have laptops and devices, and parents will give them the equipment and all of that. But that wasn't the case in government schools. So government was caught so unawares. They said, oh my God, school's going to come to a standstill. Education is going to come to a standstill. What do we do? Yeah. So that opened up a landslide of opportunities for us, which is when we entered Madhya Pradesh. We went to Tripura. We even explored Gujarat for a period of 1 year. Yeah. And then eventually Punjab and a wider scope in Delhi and so on and so forth. So I think that was really the journey, and that was the initial idea of Education Alliance. And like I said, we started with PPPs in school education, but then expanded to wider system reform and system strengthening, working with departments of education in these 5-6 states.
Sure.
And the nature of our programs in each of these geographies varied.
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu was different from what Punjab wanted, was different from what Gujarat wanted, was different from what
Sure.
Madhya Pradesh wanted. And the way we did this was we went with a very open, I would say, platform where we weren't coming in and saying, here are the 5 programs we offer
Yeah.
you. We came in and sat on an empty table with an open mind to have an open conversation. The fortunate thing was that we were allowed into that room and sit on the table. So
Yeah.
the government was saying, okay, here is what we want to do. These are the set of priorities that we have both politically and administratively. This is the time period we have. This is the amount of money we have available. These are the problems we're trying to solve. Tell us how you can help, right? And then we would sit around the table and co-create that solution and say, it looks like here's what we could do with this amount of money in this much amount of time. And I think this is what we'll be able to solve with this money and this time frame. And that's how we co-created programs in Tamil Nadu and in Madhya Pradesh and in Punjab and in Delhi. And that, I think, went down very well with most governments because we weren't dictating the agenda.
Yeah.
They were. We were just helping them design it, plan it and execute it.
And I think that's what I found very interesting and intriguing when something that you're now talking about, that you were working with even ITIs in Punjab for that matter. Sometimes you were working with grade 11, 12.
Yep.
With Tamil Nadu, you were helping with the COVID learning losses. Sometimes in some states you were working with grade 11, 12. In some states you were working with grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bal Vatikas, which also comes under WCT and hence another ministry altogether. I found it very intriguing because to go with that open mind also it amazes me because it's tough, because you're co-creating and you're making it sound very easy. But for that, then what were the fundamental principles that remained the same? Which kind of allowed you to be able to deliver so many different things and co-create, and there's a shorter span of time. Like I'm literally imagining COVID, you also had to innovate. It's not like just government was caught on now. The entire world was. So it's a very short span of time for you to also innovate and design and deliver. So what's been the fundamental principles and how have you been able to do that?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost was we realized that till there is government ownership in the problem that is being addressed or that one is trying to solve, you likely will not solve it, right? Because just you take human psyche as an example. If I come to you and say, Ayush, you're a smoker, I'll tell you how to quit smoking, but you're not ready to quit smoking, you're likely not going to quit smoking. I can give you 50 ideas, and by the way, you probably know all those 50 ideas, being a smoker.
Yeah.
But you're not open to quitting smoking. You're not going to quit smoking because I'm throwing these ideas at you. But the day you're ready and you want to quit, A, you'll find the ideas yourself. B, you may be open to someone else suggesting you 3 or 4 more. So we felt number one principle is government has to own the problem they're trying to solve.
Fair.
Which is why we said, please sit at the table and tell us what are the problems you're trying to solve, what are your priorities. That was principle number 1. I think principle number 2 was to say, okay, we are going to work towards an end goal with regard to this problem. We're not just going to solve it without having an objective target goal in mind. So tell us how long you have to solve this problem. And typically we went into governments that at least were in power for 4 years, if not 5, not less than 3, because that meant that they're not going to be able to solve the problem. आप 2 साल में बहुत कम कुछ कर पाओगे, which is meaningful. So we always selected governments, or also the ones who chose us were more stable or were likely to come back into power because we needed to work with them longer. So second principle was really, let's define these targets, these goals, these objectives, and make sure that there is a very clear-cut plan in how we will get there. That was the second principle. I think the third principle was defining the set of roles and responsibilities that the government will play, the NGO will play, and civil society and others will play, right? Don't expect me to come and solve this problem for you with my people at my cost. It's not going to happen. Tomorrow, if you want to deliver foundational literacy and numeracy to 90,000 schools across your state, there's absolutely no NGO, or all NGOs combined cannot solve that problem for you. But Can they design a program and plan a program for you which will help you activate your machinery to do that? Yes. But your role and responsibility must be very well crafted and designed so that you activate it and you deliver on it, right? So that was the third principle that we applied. And I think last was making sure that you are putting review mechanisms and a governance structure in place to be able to track your progress, because that's also very rare. It doesn't happen everywhere. In some governments we saw it happen very, very well. In others it wasn't even thought of. There were no data systems in place. There was no mechanism to review. When you took it down from a state level to a district level to a block level, it didn't really permeate through those different channels. It never went down to the school or the last mile where it was being delivered. So we said we've got to break this down to that last school that is going to deliver the intervention and make sure data is being collected there, it is being analyzed, it is being reviewed, and then it is being reported and decisions are being taken on the basis of that, right? So putting those structures in place. So a lot of what we did in terms of these principles, so to speak, don't necessarily have any technical requirement with regard to program delivery. It applies to every program. It applies to no matter what problem you're trying to solve, right? So whether it is foundational literacy and numeracy, or it is working in an ITI, or it is working with volunteers in Tamil Nadu, with women volunteers in the communities, these principles were very, very important to ensure that they are in place, and that's what we pushed government to do. And in a lot of the instances it worked well, in some it didn't.
Fair enough. I think when you were talking about your principles too, I was also thinking of something that concerns me, and I think it's starting to concern a lot of others in the space, which is the sort of attitude the government has, the sort of attitude that the funders have, and the sort of attitude the actual implementers have sometimes, because of the attitude of the other two. In terms of, I think government usually wants something very fast. Like you said, that we selected governments who had a little bit of patience of 2-3 years of delivery, because sometimes the government stakeholders are like, we want it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the funders are like, okay, only 1% increase or 2% increase,
right.
that's not enough.
Right.
And I think sometimes the partners or the implementers are starting to respond. Many a times also the for-profit bodies, the consulting firms are starting to respond by showing impact sometimes rather than delivering impact. What are your views, if any, on this?
No, I completely agree with you, and that's what upsets me a lot when in the work we do. Even 5 years is not enough.
Yeah.
We can't tie reform work to political terms,
economy of it.
Political terms. If I have 5 years, then in 5 years, here's what I have to do. Yeah. We've got to relook at reform timelines. We've got to relook at how we design reform programs. They have to be 20-30 year agendas, and therefore they have to cross political parties and political lines and political agendas. Sadly, that's just a very hard thing to do. Very, very hard thing to do. Like you said, somebody will come in and say, "Mere term mein 5 saal mein main kya kar sakta hu," and therefore they'll do input type interventions. They'll build new schools, they'll put new furniture, they'll make a swimming pool, they'll give new uniforms, they'll do rebranding, and so on and so forth. None of those is going to transform learning outcomes. None of that is going to really change the way children learn and how they get equipped for the real world, because those things take a lot of time. Somebody needs to come in and say, are we teaching children the right skills? Is this the most relevant curriculum for my children in grade 9, 10, 11 and 12? Is it leading them to get more opportunities when they go to college, or more opportunities for them to get jobs? I've never heard those conversations in any education circles in the last 17 years that I've been doing this work. Very, very hard for us to do this, right? So you're absolutely right. And of course, maybe it's a conversation for another day where I sit down with you and say, how should this be redefined? What would a 30-year education agenda for India look like? Who should lead it? How should you set up an administrative and an education and a political unit that only drives education reform with a 30-year horizon. So I think it may be a conversation for another day. But today I believe with the limited amount of time you have available, with the political terms of parties working in government, there's very little you will actually achieve. And sadly what happens is, even whatever you do achieve in that cycle, the moment that shifts and that turns either to another party or to another leader, the agenda falls apart. That reform initiative most likely falls apart. And I can give you a number of examples where within the same parties, in the same government, we've seen a change of heart with regard to a program that's been running beautifully well for 3 years. New leader comes in, same political party, and decides this is not my priority, I'm going to change it. So where do we stand with regards to this? I'll quote a bureaucrat who I spoke to, an IAS officer who was the Commissioner of Education in a very large state that we worked in the past 5-6 years. And I was having a conversation with him when he was transferred out of the education department. And I mentioned to him, I said, sir, you were here for 2 years. You came with a 15-point agenda. We started delivering on 9 out of those 15 points so beautifully. You activated the state machinery. You made it a political priority. You did so well, and you were on your path to showing true reform work in these 9 areas. And now you've been transferred out. So my interview to him was like, what are we supposed to do when this happens? And he says, remember one thing. He said, we are temporary. We are government officers who temporarily come into these departments for short periods of time, and it will always be the case. We'll come and we'll go. So we are temporary with regard to government work. You, civil society, are the permanent people who will ensure that this work continues. That for me was an aha moment, that a government officer is saying that I am temporary in government, but it's a fact. A politician is temporary. A CM is temporary, an EM is temporary, a bureaucrat is temporary. Who's permanent? Civil society is permanent. So if we want to see change happen, we have to make sure that it continues and it progresses. And we need to push those people who temporarily come into positions of power to keep pushing the agenda of reform. So the way it should be done, like I said, conversation for another day. But I do have some ideas of how we can do this as well.
No, I think it's a very powerful thought. I think just the statement itself of realizing the permanence of civil society, and I think for all the listeners, because as you said at the start of the conversation, people don't the income levels in social sector have increased, but people don't come to the social sector for that income levels because they're still lesser than a lot of other avenues. So I think this also gives a lot of strength to people to just know such conversations are happening. And I think all of us can see, especially people who are working with the government, all of us can see the government starting to understand the civil society better in terms of partnership with the government. I would also say smarter bureaucrats are coming in, and the younger and younger the lot keeps on getting, and they get more exposure. I think so many district fellowships have started. So many bureaucrats, I did one of these fellowships called CMGGA, where you work with the Haryana government. All the IAS officers who got to bond with all of these CMGGAs when they were under training, when they were deputy commissioners, have a much higher buy-in into working with the civil society or people outside the government. And they don't look at them with suspicion. I think we've spoken about Ashish so much. I think he was at a podcast, and the 2 challenges he counted, which made me feel, I feel heard in the sense that he also at that level faces the same challenge. The challenge of suspicion. When you enter a government bureaucrat's room.
Absolutely. Does that person trust you?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's so important for the civil society to keep on functioning. Something we are talking about in terms of the 3 years or 2 years or whatever of a program can just literally break down the moment change in leadership happens. But while you're talking about it, let's talk about champions a little more. And I think you talked about champions also at the start of your journey. When you were starting out, there was a political champion that he had in South Delhi who you shifted out for certain reasons, and suddenly it took a lot of time, then planned to actually set it up. Champions now in like the large state that you're talking about and all of those things. How do you see the role of champions in government? And I'm not talking about champions just as bureaucrats. Champions at all levels. How do you see that? I would also add an additional question. How do you see being able to strengthen their work and role so that it's sustainable, even if, let's say, you were to move out of Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Tripura, wherever else, Delhi, Uttarakhand, wherever you're working? How do you see strengthening that out?
Yeah. So, I've worked with political champions, I've worked with senior government administrative champions, I've worked with junior administrative government champions, and I've also worked with teacher and leader principal champions. So I think you're absolutely right. Champions are at all levels. And what is a champion? A champion is somebody who believes they're doing the right thing for the right reasons, right? And they provide a lot of trust to people who they are answerable to, because they're doing the right things for the right reasons. So they will bring that trust and that conviction to the table. That is really what constitutes a champion. And anyone can be that, right? If there is I've seen a teacher who believes that what she's doing is the right thing for the right reason, and will convince her principal or the headmistress that let me do this because I know my children will learn better. So even though I am not mandated to do it, or the regulations don't allow me to do it, I will do it because I'm doing it for the right reasons. And there's a belief that they are able to instill in others by that trait of theirs, or that particular skill that they have.
Yeah.
Right? Because she said...
That's true. I'm just enjoying so many... I, at this point, have more questions than I began with, and I'm enjoying the conversation so much. But I would also want to move to the next segment. But before I do, since you just mentioned Mission Ankur, I want to, for our audience to understand your work at a more deeper level. And I think Mission Ankur, on that note, has been one of the longest running at system level, at large scale program of yours. Can you tell us a little bit more about Mission and FLN Mission, also from the lens of working in a consortium, because you have been working in a consortium with different partners taking up different roles in that journey?
Sure. So, Mission Ankur is Madhya Pradesh's initiative to provide foundational literacy and numeracy to grades 1, 2 and 3. And this is basically means that giving them Hindi and math skills that they should acquire in grades 1, 2 and 3, right? So it's under Nipun Bharat, which is a national mission by the government of India, and it is supposed to be delivered across all our states, and it's, I think, being done in most states, but of course at different varying degrees of rigor and pace. Madhya Pradesh has been doing this since 2019, pre-COVID and through COVID, and now post-COVID. So this is the 6th year of Mission Ankur that has been at play. We are part of a consortium that comprises of 3 main partners, the Education Alliance, Central Square Foundation and Room to Read, who have been part of this program. We've also had 2 other organizations along the way, Vikram Shila and Soul's Ark, who played a role to provide the numeracy inputs on this program. It's a very, very large program. It cuts across all 90,000 schools of Madhya Pradesh. It caters to every child in every school who's in grade 1 and 2 and 3. And essentially the goal is, how do I improve the way Hindi and math is taught? So there are multiple aspects to the program. The first is around material, right? The consortium, and when I say consortium, it's not only the NGO partners, but it's mainly the government. So the SCRT and the Rajya Shiksha Kendra that sit in Bhopal, that sit together and discuss all the different aspects of this project. So first was around material. What is the material that is being provided to the children in grades 1, 2 and 3 for Hindi and math? We looked at that very carefully. We studied it. We looked at the textbooks that are going out there. We looked at the workbooks. We looked at the assessments that are being done through these textbooks, both formatively and summatively. And then we came up with a additional set of material that would help both teachers and children do better. So we created teacher guides, but we also created workbooks, which then got disseminated to all the teachers and students across the state. Right? That was number one. I think once you've done that, the second thing we looked at was around teacher professional development. That now that we've introduced a new approach to teaching foundational literacy and numeracy, what we call under structured pedagogy, we had to provide adequate and relevant training to teachers. So not only did we design that and develop the content, we also helped deliver that to teachers across 90,000 schools. That was the second. The third was around monitoring. Like I had said in a previous question, that how do you review and evaluate what is happening on the ground? How do you monitor what is happening on the ground? You've got to train your field force, in this case block coordinators and cluster resource coordinators, who go out to schools regularly observing the functioning of the school. Typically what these people were doing in the past is they would go and observe very superficial indicators, not necessarily learning of children in classrooms, because they weren't trained to do that. So what we did is we designed monitoring tools through a tech-based platform which was on their mobile phone, where when they went into school and when they go into school, they actually monitor the teaching of a teacher who's in grade 1, 2 or 3, and sit at the back of a class, observe her class, fill out the data form and say how is she performing, and then that data gets fed into a central repository which then comes to us and then we evaluate it. So that was the third around monitoring. The fourth is around mentoring, which is how do you not only train teachers, but how do you mentor teachers? Training is not enough. If I come to you and I give you 7 days of training in the beginning of the year, but after 3 months you have a problem and you don't know how to solve it, you need someone you can go to who can actually guide you and say, here's how you solve the problem, let me connect you to another teacher who had the same problem and this is how she solved it. So there's a mentor in place that is constantly supporting you through your journey. So we help the state put that in place, define how these mentors would get identified, how they'd get trained, and then how they would work on the ground. And the last was around governance, right? Which is really how does all of this get governed, so to speak, at a state level, at a district level, at a block cluster level, and at a block level, right? And how do you actually, at each level, how are you governing what is happening at the school? So we have reviews that take place at blocks, at districts, and at the state, where data and a very rigorous and well-defined agenda is defined at the block, at the district, at the state level, and then that is communicated upwards, right? And then all of that gets collated, and then every month there is sort of a state review that happens on this program, and the progress is then evaluated. Essentially what we've seen happen as a result of putting this program in place, like I said, what we really do with the state is co-create. We help design, we help plan, we help execute. What has happened over the 6 years is we've seen the learning levels, or I should say the grade levels of children who are in grade 3 and should be at the grade 3 level. We've seen those levels rise dramatically. You know, in the most recent NAS study also, you saw that Madhya Pradesh now ranks in the top 5 states out of all states in the country, which is largely in part to what the state has focused on with Mission Ankur and how they have done this under the leadership of Rashmi ma'am, and then Dhanraju sir, and now Harjinder sir and Sanjeev sir. So, and of course the political leadership that's behind it. So there's been a lot of momentum. There has been a fair amount of priority set by the state. There's been budgets that's been allocated to this in the right manner, both from the center and the state. And it's a great example of a very large scale program which brought in civil society for innovation, but took ownership to deliver on its own. And you're seeing the results of it 5 years later.
Thank you. Thank you so much for explaining that in so much detail. I think that gives our audience a granular understanding of what you folks do in education and all of that. And while I'm very tempted to go to the next segment, but just before that, a very small question about working in consortiums. I think one of the reasons I asked about Mission Ankur was also, I'm curious what is it like working in a consortium? Because different partners are doing different things, and it's not just those partners, but maybe you were talking about how strategic leadership nahi hai, but that Tamil Nadu Principal Secretary at the World Bank conference says that we have 100 plus NGOs working with us. So there's so many partners today, and it's only going to grow. How's that in a landscape of Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, wherever else?
Working in partnership is not easy. It's actually very, very tough, because who is partnering in when you come together in a consortium? It's people. It's not Education Alliance partnering with CSF. Those are two names of entities, but it is the people in that organization who partner with the people in the other organization. So which means that these are human beings who are coming together to work together. And so it's no different to getting married to somebody, and in this case getting married to multiple people at times. It's hard because you've got to share a lot about who you are, what you're thinking, how you function, what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to achieve that, how will you monitor your progress, and be on the same page with regard to all of these, right? So that's really what a partnership means. And imagine multiplying that in some instances with multiple partners, not just one or two. So it's very, very, very hard, because not everyone thinks the same way you do. I remember when we got into the partnership in Madhya Pradesh, the one thing I said to the team sitting around the table at that time, there were 4 organizations with 5 representatives each, and we were 20 of us sitting in a conference room in one of our offices, and we were having this conversation, and I said, we're all getting on this journey to build a palace. But today, if I ask you to draw what that palace looks like, independently, that 20 of us, we'll have 20 different images. 20 different images. And imagine when we say, okay, go build the palace, and each of you builds the palace that you have drawn. Imagine what that palace will look like. It will look like a mess. Because everyone has a different image of what that palace is going to look like 5 years from now. So first and foremost, let's come together and draw this image together. So that we know at least हम बना क्या रहे हैं. पहले तो वो इमेज अपने दिमाग में बनाओ कि आप बना क्या रहे हो. वो 5 साल के बाद वो ऐसे लगेगा. And then everybody agree, okay, fine. This is taken a little bit of my design and a little bit of his design, a little bit of her design. Or actually it's taken nothing of mine, but I'm okay with it. Or if I'm not okay with it, let me share it now. All those conversations have to be had before you even start the journey. Then once you've built this image, then let's start the journey of how you will get there. And who will play what role in getting there. I think a lot of the time, when you come together in collaborations and in consortiums, you don't do this. You get in assuming that everyone's got the same image of that palace in their mind. और हम वही image बना रहे हैं, and then along the way when you start building it and start getting there, you say, यार ये क्या बना रहा है? ये तो this is not what I was planning to make, और ये क्या बना रहा है? This is not what I was planning to make, and then you start running into rough weather. So important to have a crystal clear image of what you're trying to achieve, and a crystal clear pathway of how you're going to get there, and what role I will play, and what role you will play, and what role she will play. Right? That is so critical. So consortiums and collaborations and partnerships are tough. It's about people getting into relationships. These are not only professional, these are very personal at times. You in this collaboration represent your organization. So you will have to sometimes rise above your own personal conflicts and represent the organization. Now, what is the culture of your organization? And does it match the culture of my organization? What is your style of working? Does it match my style of working? So there are so many complexities involved in this, and we face this. So I'm sharing it because we face these challenges in many instances, and almost all instances we've been able to overcome them. But they've been tough because it does involve human behavior, human personalities. Just managing those relationships and those complexities is very, very hard.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I found your insight very practical, and I think very, very, very insightful. And I think it's not just the palace ka design at the start, it's also 6 months later, kaun si tile lagegi se leke, because you have to keep coming back to the same image.
Exactly. So dialogue and communication so critical. वो भी हम नहीं करते. Collaboratively नहीं करते. आप अपने ऑफिस में कुछ डिजाइन कर रहे हो, मैं अपने ऑफिस में कुछ डिजाइन कर रहा हूँ, फिर हम आते हैं, आपने टाइल लगा दी, मैंने ईंट लगाई, बट वो मैच नहीं हो रहे, है ना? So absolutely correct.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask you're leading an organization which is working in these very technical areas. Sometimes to the outside world, people say, and you have also quoted them saying, education ही तो है, कितना मुश्किल होगा solve करना. But when you get into any field, I know it's not nuclear physics, but it's still a very technical this thing, and you need certain amount of academic rigor to be able to do that. How do you manage it? How did you manage to learn, especially for, let's say, people who are joining a health sector because they're interested, education sector because they're interested, women empowerment, anything else, gender, whatever. How, like, they have their existing skills, especially let's say someone coming from corporate 5-7 years, they have done marketing or something else. How do they pick up this new area and that rigor and technical understanding like you did? Or so, how did you do that?
I mean, for me, like I said, I dived head first, right? So I just learned how to swim. No one taught me. And I had people back me because I was doing the right thing for the right reasons, and continued to do that, learned along the way. I've never taught in a school. Of course, I've been in, I don't know how many thousands of classrooms and seen thousands of teachers and observed and learnt by seeing and by not by doing, but by, I guess, experiencing through visits and conversations and so on and so forth. I think the team we've built today has a combination of skills and experience, and we leverage that, right, gravely. We basically have a very rigorous professional development program within TEA where we've got all levels of people being trained very rigorously on technical skills, but also basic people management skills, on social sector experiences and requirements and skills, and we make sure that we grow our people professionally every year. So there's a pathway that everyone has to follow, a learning journey that everyone has to follow, that is tracked, that is also evaluated, and then incentives and increments are provided on the basis of how you've done professionally and how much you've grown professionally. तो उस पर हम बहुत ध्यान देते हैं. I think the other way we've learned is we like to call ourselves generalists in problem solving, not specialists, because the number of problems that need to be solved are too many and too vast, and the priorities, like I said, vary from state to state to state. So if we become specialists, then we'll only be able to solve a few which may not be priorities for many. So when we're generalists, we apply certain principles to problem solving. We take those principles across, which I shared earlier, across the problems we try to solve, and because the principles are applicable to all the problems we solve, we are able to acquire the intelligence around how we solve them. And the way we do that is by partnering with the technical organizations. So if tomorrow I am building, let's give you an example of the program we're doing in Tamil Nadu with the Tamil Nadu government around solving for English. How do you teach English to middle school children, right? Grade 6, 7 and 8. Given that teachers in those classes don't speak English, let alone teach it. So how do we do that? So we worked with the government. That was a priority for the government. We worked with them to say, okay, can we use technology? Now government said, yes, we can use technology because these middle schools have high-tech labs. And 6,000 of them have high-tech labs and computers and computer labs. So we can install some kind of a software which will allow children to do this. So we partnered with Ekstep Foundation, and we said, will you help us build this software? And they came together, and then we partnered with TIS, which is the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and we said, can you help us develop the content? And then we partnered with IIT Madras to say, can you help us with the technology? So partners came together in this initiative, the technical partners came together in this initiative to build a AI-based software which then got loaded onto computers, and then we as the project manager for the government helped them design a program which then is now being delivered in the 6,000 schools across Tamil Nadu, right? So that's an example of how you gain expertise. Not necessarily everything has to be built organically within the organization, but you acquire things inorganically as well. And we've done this in Punjab, we do this in Delhi, we've done this in Madhya Pradesh. So everywhere you see us work, we've got technical partners who come in because they are really the specialists and you can never beat them.
Okay. And when it comes to generally upskilling, because you work with so many people at your own organization, you teach these courses or mentor, what do you find missing, or on the other side, just things that people should prioritize when they're looking at coming to these organizations and working?
So, if I want to give one piece of advice to people coming in or who are in the organization, I say this repeatedly in my organization, but I'll say it to others who may be considering a role in the sector, is when you do consider coming into the social sector, just remember that you are coming in to run a marathon, right? And a marathon has to be run at a steady, consistent and reasonably decent pace. But it's a long race. But it has to be done consistently and steadily, right? It's not that you just come and walk, because then you will take forever to complete the race. Don't think of running a sprint, because it's a marathon that you have to run, and if you run it at a pace of a sprint, you will burn. That's one thing I've seen happen with so many leaders and people who are in the sector, is that they come in running a sprint, not realizing that this is a marathon that they have entered into, and they burn out. Very often I've seen very young leaders who are in their early 30s who are taking breaks and who have burnt out and they've got no energy left and they are redefining themselves, or they've taken a sabbatical and they've gone off. And I just feel that there's no reason for a lot of people to get there to begin with. I'm in my early 50s now. I've been doing this for 17 years. Started when I was 37. But I'm nowhere near burning out, because I'm running a marathon and I'm doing it at a pace which I think will not burn me out. So I would give that advice to people, is that please temper yourself and your mindsets to come in here for the long haul. I see a lot of young people who are now finishing their bachelor's and their master's in their 20s, late 20s, early 20s, who come in, spend a year in a department within our organization and say, I'm getting bored. I'm done. Yeah. I've learnt everything. I've done everything I had to do. Now I want to transfer out. I want to go to another geography. I want to work in a different department altogether. I'm like, you've done it once. You've done it for 1 year. That is not a learner's mindset. That's being impatient. That's running the sprint in a marathon race. And I think you will struggle if that's the approach you come in with. So that's the only piece of advice I'd like to give, is that temper yourself and, pace yourself, come in to run a marathon, do it at a pace that's manageable, and stay in it for the long haul. You don't have to work in the same organization for 30 years, but, just come with that mindset.
This brings me to my favorite part of the conversation, which is the rapid fire. Don't worry, nothing controversial, but just want to touch upon a lot of things and just ask you some interesting questions. Let's start. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. One advice from your father that really mattered to you even today?
Follow your passion.
One of the things with Education Alliance which you may have done differently if you were to begin it all over again?
Maybe worked with a combination of government, schools and the community directly.
Okay. One book that really stays with you?
So, Poor Economics by Abhijit Banerjee. I think I've learnt a lot about the sector, and what I do today I think has been inspired by what I read in that book.
Okay. And if, let's say, a social entrepreneur comes to you for advice and says, "Mujhe nahi samajh mein aata how to get funding what would your advice be? What to do to get funding?
Besharam banna sikho, or whoever you meet, wherever you meet them, ask them for their money.
Fair enough. Maybe they'll be coming to you then.
That's fine.
Yeah. If you were to start something other than school education, something in social sector, what would that likely be in?
I think I would work on skilling. I'd work with young adolescents who've been able to get to a certain stage of education and now have taken control of their own lives. I would now like to work with them on careers and higher ed pathways and opportunities.
Okay. One person in history, if you had a chance to host for a dinner or just have a conversation with over dinner, who would that be?
I think Amit Shah. I really want to get to know what's going on in his mind and how he thinks and why he does what he does.
Interesting. I am not sure how much he may open up.
That's
but
fine. I'm assuming that he will talk. But
yeah.
I would really like to know what he's thinking and what's going on in his mind.
Fair enough. And one teacher who left a big impact on you? Or a couple of, whatever you prefer.
So Arun Kapoor, he taught me history.
Yeah.
Still a mentor of mine and a dear friend today because we both work in education.
Yeah.
But I just liked his demeanor and his style as a teacher because he was less a teacher and more a guide. Yeah. And I really think that's the role of a teacher, is to let children flourish but guide them as they flourish. And he did that beautifully, he continues to do that.
Yeah, very interestingly, I think when I thought I would like to host you on the podcast, it was your LinkedIn post
about him
visiting him that
in his school.
I'd seen, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. How would you rate yourself as a boss?
On a scale, or you?
Let's do it on a scale. 1 to 10.
1 to 10. Probably a 9.
Okay.
I'd like to believe that I listen to not just the people who directly report to me, but I listen to everybody, and I think I give everyone a fair voice, but also the respect that human beings deserve.
Okay. What do you like? What do you value in people working with you? What traits, attributes do you particularly look for or value?
So I look for dependability. Because I give I give people a lot of freedom and autonomy to operate. And so the dependability factor on them is very, very high. So if I expect them to do something and they do it, then I'm very happy. If they don't, then I'm not.
Okay. One field experience that stays with you, or interesting anecdote from field that you would like to share with us.
I remember going to this school once and speaking to kids in I think it was grade 4, so they were 8-year-olds. It was largely girls. They had a female teacher, and I asked them कि आपको अपनी टीचर के बारे में क्या अच्छा लगता है? And I think there was almost sort of a unanimous response to say कि टीचर हमसे बहुत प्यार करती है. And that just made me feel that gosh, there's so much confidence and love in the hearts and minds of these children that they were so confident to speak and say that our teacher loves us. You know, the warmth that came with that just sort of stuck with me, that if all teachers could provide love to their students, it would create a very different learning environment. I don't think enough of our teachers do that.
One thing, or the few things that you brought over or learned from your previous life, which is the corporate and the MBA life?
I think largely more in terms of how to be a strategic thinker, not just go with one's passion or gut, but also apply, principles like evidence and experience and data and doing research and field work and things of that nature. So being very strategic in one's approach to problem solving. I think that's what I did when I was in the corporate world, and I think I've brought that to this organization.
And I think the last question, if you were to be given a chance to have any conversation with your father again, what would you like to have it about?
So I would probably ask him that if your friends asked you, what makes you proud about your son, what would you say?
Wow, that's quite a perfect response. Thank you. That was your rapid fire. And I think to end our conversation today, one thing that I would like to ask you is one, what's your vision for yourself and for your organization and work for the future? And if you have any advice for our audience, who's mostly people working in the social sector or considering working in the social sector.
So I think the one thing for myself, the vision is I've run 1/10 of the marathon so far. So I'm hoping that I can complete this marathon I'm running and continue running at the pace I'm running at. So by God's grace, I'll stay healthy, active and fit to be able to complete this marathon. That's my one vision for myself, and hopefully inspire others along the way to join the race. And advice for people who are considering joining the social sector and the listeners really would be, like I said, follow your heart, follow your passion, come in for the right reasons. Don't just join the space because it's another job. It's extremely gratifying, but it's extremely challenging and demotivating at times at the same time. So be careful about that. But it's a wonderful space to work, and if you spend your life working in the social sector, I think it will be a life well lived.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was genuinely a pleasure having a conversation with you today.
Thanks, Ayush. Thank you.